Welcome to Future Proof Business. Smart strategies, real insights, and tools to lead and scale in a fast-changing world. Let's future-proof your success.
Welcome to the
Future Proof Business
podcast. My name is Daniel Rosenstein, host of the show. Today I have the honor of interviewing Chris Natzke. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Daniel. It's my pleasure.
I did a little bit of research about you, and some quick stats is that you are an 8th degree black belt in Taekwondo, like top 1% in the world. And I also noticed that you went to college, you played college football.
Yes, I did.
And I just wanted to mention to everybody, when I was researching about you before our meeting today, the interview, I did some research on ChatGPT. I'm going to actually read exactly what ChatGPT said because I was curious. I thought that was very rare. Somebody plays college football because that's like a discipline by itself, and so is martial arts. So I thought that was very rare to have somebody play college football for 4 years and have a black belt. And that's talking about like any black belt, not just 8th degree black belt. So I'm going to read exactly what ChatGPT wrote when I sent here. What's the combination of people playing, college football and participating in martial arts? It says estimate about 1 or 2% of martial arts students earn a black belt, while the exact U.S. numbers vary. It says about 6 to 8 million people participate in martial arts all across the United States. And then it says here with football, it's about 70,000 athletes that play football each year and about 700,000 the last 10 years. But then this is what I thought was so striking, because on ChatGPT, you said the bottom line is, in terms of the cross of how many people play football and martial arts, it says, while there's some individuals like Chris Natzke, this is what ChatGPT says. So actually, you're the only person in the world that ChatGPT mentioned when I said how many people have played college football and, have a black belt in martial arts. So I thought that was extremely impressive that ChatGPT called you out. That's definitely a huge recognition by itself. So
Thanks.
Congratulations on all, I'm sure a lot of people you meet, congratulate you. I'm very excited to interview you because I've studied martial arts for a few years, not as much as you did, obviously. So I'm very excited about this interview today. Was there anything else you'd like to share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
No, you've kind of capsulized it there. Both martial arts from a very young age, and then I was able to earn a scholarship to Northwestern University, where I lettered 4 years in football and got to play in stadiums, Big Ten stadiums all around the country, and play against several people that eventually went to the NFL. So it was a big part of my life, and glad I was able to experience it.
So what inspired you to get into martial arts?
Yeah, great question. I often will share this in my keynote talk. It's kind of my signature story. I started martial arts in 1973. And back in the day, Daniel, back in the early 70s, martial arts weren't like they are today, where you could basically see a school on every corner. When I grew up in a small town in southeastern Wisconsin, and got inspired because at the time there was a TV show called Kung Fu with David Carradine. And at that time, that was really right at the beginning of the Bruce Lee craze and all that. So Kung Fu was on television, and I wanted to do karate. And so I found a place where they were doing it in my little hometown at the community center, and literally went in there and saw these people with these amazing movements and literally felt like I came home. And in September, that'll be 52 years ago. So it's that simple. It was just something that stuck with me, and it helped form my life. So many of the positive experience that I've had, either directly or indirectly, have come from my background in martial arts.
Now, I want to ask another question about that, because as you just mentioned, there's, over the years, martial arts has become more mainstream. It's not just, like a rare commodity like it used to be back in the 1970s. And probably there was a lot of stereotypes around that as well. But still a lot of people do martial arts as well as like any other sport. Most of them drop out like within the first year, but you stuck it out to, study for many years and went on to not just get a black belt, but an 8th degree black belt. What inspired you to continue on? Like, why most people drop off?
It's interesting. I think that people start and stop martial arts for a variety of reasons. I think for me, it was just something I had such a passion for. And inherent within that experience for me is even at a very young age, I always was very infatuated with getting better, with increasing my skills. And, and reading the magazines and seeing my heroes, my martial art heroes at that time. And so it was just something that really just stuck with me. And in fact, I just saw this the other day as I was going through some files. I oftentimes will use this example when I speak to high schoolers. And I started martial art training at 10 years old. And so when I was approximately 11 years old, I'm in fifth grade, and there's an assignment for an autobiography. So I did what any 11-year-old would do. I said, when I was 1, I did this. When I was 5, I went to Disneyland. And I said, when I was 10 years old, I started Taekwondo. I'm now a blue belt, and one day I want to make it my career. So I knew it at a very early age. And I was also really blessed because I had amazing instructors and training partners that helped me grow, develop, push me during that time. And so many of my core relationships, particularly with my original Taekwondo instructor, started at a very young age. He was like a second father to me. And so what I realized very early wasn't just the physical application, although I was absolutely in love with that. It was what I saw martial arts do for me and others. And I'll just give you this little story. One of the very first times I trained with my Taekwondo Grandmaster instructor, Grandmaster J.K. Lee. First of all, I just need to say I was one of the only kids in the entire classroom because at that time, it was just mostly adults that were training. And I was in the corner of the room. My legs were spread wide. I was stretching out, getting ready for that morning's training. And he walked on the mat and he started surveying all the students. And pretty soon I realized he was staring directly at me. And before I could move a muscle, Grandmaster Lee had come over, sat down in front of me, and he put his right foot on the inside of one leg, his left foot on the inside of the other. He grabbed the ends of my belt and with one push-pull, split me out to 180 degrees. And so I like to joke, I learned 2 lessons that day. Is number 1, I learned that anyone can do the splits once. But the second thing I learned, and the thing that just stays with me to this day, Daniel, is he looked at me in the eyes and he said to me in his broken English, he said, "I will make you a champion. I will make you a champion." Now, I grew up in a household with an alcoholic father. So he was in the home, but really struggled with that addiction. So I had a lot of instability in terms of a male role model in my life at that time. But now I had this Korean Superman who said he would make me a champion. And it's interesting, as I've reflected on it, as a 13-year-old, I heard you're going to win trophies and you're going to win tournaments, et cetera. But as I've reflected on it, all these years, I've realized what my heart heard was, "I believe in you." And when that happened, it created a spark inside of me, and I just couldn't get enough of it.
I mean, so you mentioned, how like your teacher said, "I'll make you into a champion." Can you describe like what were the things you got from martial arts aside from like fighting? Like, how did it really transform your life?
100%. There's so many things, because one of the beautiful things about martial arts is how it can have a positive impact on us, not only physically, but also emotionally and spiritually for that matter, and mentally. And so what ends up happening is there's this beautiful dance is as you begin to develop physically, you begin to gain more self-confidence because you're able to express yourself physically. You have the ability to defend yourself, which gives you power. But at the same time, when you are realizing that you have this power, that you can do damage with it, in my opinion, it also starts to bring a sense of humility and a sense of respect for yourself and others. And so what it basically does is it has this wonderful marriage of taking the physical and helping us develop, but also it's steeped in character development, so it's steeped in respect. We have the 5 tenets of Taekwondo, which are courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. And as we're moving through our martial art journey, there are times when we can be very challenged. We don't know if we can do it, but when you start to break through those barriers, now what ends up happening, you begin building momentum. And then ideally, you take those same lessons learned in martial arts and you apply them to every other aspect of your life.
Really amazing. I mean, when I studied martial arts, I definitely noticed it helped me make me more self-confident.
Yeah.
And I was bullied a lot as a kid. So for me, that was really important. It was a huge transformation for me. But now, after all these years, you kind of pivoted a little bit to also be offering coaching and keynote speaking. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? What type of coaching do you offer?
Yeah, great question. It really kind of derived, both my speaking and my coaching derived from my basis in martial arts. I also have a master's in spiritual psychology from University of Santa Monica. So I basically molded those two worlds together. And the way that I like to put it is that I believe that the lessons of martial arts that we've just been talking about can be utilized by people. It can benefit people, and you don't have to spend 20, 30, 40, 50 years kicking and punching. So interestingly enough, I've been in front of a room teaching martial arts, or at least assisting in classes since I was 13 years old. Got my junior black belt at 14, so I was assisting. So for me, being in front of a room and speaking was always very natural, okay? And when I opened up my martial arts studio back in 1995, I had 6 competitors in a 2-mile radius of me. So I needed to stand apart from them. And I could have done yellow page ads and newspaper ads, et cetera. But I thought, I'm pretty good at communicating. Why don't I go out and start going to schools and communicating the benefits of martial arts? And that's how I developed initially my speaking prowess, as well as grew my school. And then eventually people said, hey, would you come to speak to this group and that group, et cetera? And then also inherent within martial arts is the character development and the life lessons, as well as I was an entrepreneur, running a martial arts studio as well. So in my coaching, I do life coaching as well as business coaching, helping people take the principles and lessons that I've learned and strategies with what I call the champion's mindset and apply those to their lives, their businesses, and their relationships.
So what was your biggest mindset shift in transitioning from martial arts to the entrepreneur world?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I started my career out of college working for the top consumer products company in the country. And so very safe, very stable, and quite honestly, gained tremendous benefit from that experience. I would not replace that for the world. And then after 10 years, I decided to move on my own and follow my dream. And I oftentimes, particularly when I speak with entrepreneurs, I say, tell me if this is right, that when you decided to make that leap to open up your own business, it not only was the most exhilarating time of your life, it was also the most petrifying time of your life, right? Because there's no safety net. And so the biggest thing for me is when I was going through that experience is trusting myself, trusting that I had the skills. And I went and got educated on business and got mentored, et cetera, et cetera. But understanding that if we are really following our purpose, for me, I believe it was my purpose to influence others and develop them through martial arts, that when we step into it, even if it scares the heck out of us, but if we step into and we commit to it, the universe will open things up. And that's exactly what it did for me. And so that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, is to have faith in myself and also to lean into the fear. And then the other thing that I would say is this, is we have a saying in martial arts is that a black belt is a white belt that never quit. A black belt is a white belt that never quit, meaning you need to have perseverance, but at the same time, you need to be able to be humble enough to be a white belt when you don't know something. So there were certain things I was in the corporate world. I knew a lot about that aspect of business, but running a martial arts studio, I had a lot to learn. I was a white belt again. So I had to learn, but I took the same principles I learned to get my physical black belt into business. And that's when things started to really take off.
How hard is it I'm curious to know, to go up the different black belt degrees to second degree black belt, third degree? Does it take many years?
Yeah.
How far did you go from you said a yellow belt to orange belt versus third degree black belt to fourth degree black belt?
So let me I'll explain it in a couple of ways. Is generally speaking, depending upon the martial arts system, it's anywhere from 3 to 4 years to get your first degree black belt. And that's if you're studying diligently during that time. And then from once you get your first degree black belt, generally speaking, from first to second is 2 years, from second to third is 3 years, from third to fourth is 4 years, and so forth. The other way that I like to explain it to people is in Taekwondo, there are 9 degrees of black belt. So think of it this way. The first 3 degrees are basically the fighters, first, second, third degree. Then fourth, fifth, and sixth are the teachers, the instructors, what we would call in Korean martial arts, the sabumnim, the honored instructor. And then the 7th, 8th, and 9th degrees, we become the philosophers or the kwanjangnims. And so in that essence, what you've got is a development that occurs not only physically, but as we age, our physical skills may diminish, but hopefully our ability to bring wisdom and philosophy to the martial arts increases based on our experience.
Wow. It's really in depth. I don't know how many people know that. It's not, just a bunch of, ruffians running into the ring and fighting.
And even if you look at what the term of martial arts or of Taekwondo means, and I'm sure that in Japanese and Okinawan, when they say karate do, it would mean the same thing. But Taekwondo means to, kick with the foot. Kwan means to smash with the hand. But do means way of morality or the way. And so it isn't, again, just a physical activity. It is a lifestyle. It is a philosophy. And it is a way of living and showing up in the world.
So what are some of the top leadership skills you learned from martial arts?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, number one is the ability first to be a good student. If you're going to thrive in the martial arts, regardless of what practice you're doing, you have to be a good student. Now, I'll routinely, if I train with an instructor in a style that I'm not ranked in, I'll wear a white belt, right? So being, the ever growing white belt is what you want to be. And so in leadership, I think it's so important for us to be able to be students again and to listen and to connect with people. When you're teaching martial arts, one of the things that I've learned as a skill is the ability to read people, to relate to them and understand when they're struggling, when they need encouragement, when they need a kick in the butt, right? And as a leader, we need to do that with our people as well. I think the other thing that's important as a leader, and I have 3 aspects that I speak about in my talks, is number one, what I call having a purposeful vision. So leaders, we have to have a vision for where we're going ahead. And when you're a student in the martial arts or an instructor or a practitioner, you have a vision for your next goal, right? Then the second would be what I would call conscious persistence. As I said, a black belt is a white belt that never quit. What many of us do is when we come upon difficulty is we stop and it's not for me, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm advocating constantly beating our head against the wall if something's not working. But I think we need to be stubborn in our goals and flexible in our methods when that happens. But to have the perseverance to keep showing up. And then finally, I would say, is learning to take inspired action. As I said before, as an entrepreneur, I was scared to death at times, but still I had been in situations in martial arts where I was scared to death as well. And I moved through it and I realized that's where the magic happened, was on the other side of that.
Can we share a time of how, all the things you learned from martial arts helped you in the real life, outside of martial arts, in the real world, like a personal challenge in life?
Yeah. I'll tell you, probably the greatest challenge that's just coming to mind right now is I was a young black belt at the time. This was the summer of 1980. So I'm getting ready to start my senior year of high school. And quite honestly, Daniel, life was good. I just received my 2nd degree black belt in January. I was dating my high school sweetheart who would later on become my wife, blessed me with 2 kids. I was an all-star football player. I was getting recruited by Division I schools and Ivy League schools from all over the country. And I had just won an award in the state of Wisconsin, being chosen as one of 2 young men to represent the state of Wisconsin in what was called Boys Nation. And I went as a Boys Nation senator that summer and met President Carter in the Rose Garden. So life was really good. I was at a football camp, a week-long football camp in northern Wisconsin, and came home on a Friday afternoon at the end of June. And when I arrived home, what I was expecting to see is the garage door open, my brother and sister playing outside. My mom would have been home that day. But when I arrived home, the garage door was closed, no one was around, and all I could see was a note on the door. So my buddy's dad drove up the driveway. I got out of the car and I looked at the note and it said, "Dear Chris, there's been a terrible tragedy in our family. Stay right where you are. And so I stood there stunned for about 5 or 10 minutes. And soon afterwards, my father and my uncle drove up and informed me that my brother, who was about 6 years my junior, my brother Danny, had drowned 2 hours before at the local city beach. And so instantly life changed. Instantly life changed. And I don't know, I don't, of course, want this to ever to happen to anyone, to have someone that's close to them die. But what I really realized at that time is, okay, now is where, all the strength that I developed in martial arts, this is when I really needed it. Does that make sense? Now is when I needed to center myself, is where I needed to be there to serve my parents, where I needed to take care of myself as well and be able to push through. And it didn't mean to push down the sadness and push down the grief. It meant to be brave enough to be able to let it come up. And for whatever reason, at 17 years old, I was able to do that. And so that was probably the first time in my life where I really had to lean into the skills I had learned. And my Taekwondo instructor, Grandmaster Lee, was there with me the entire time. He was there supporting me just like a loving father would be. So, that was another pivotal aspect, because seeing the way he treated me there made me realize that's how I wanted to be for my students if they, in fact, ever had to go through any personal tragedies.
Wow, you were very lucky to have such a, instructor like that was so supportive.
100%.
That's really, thank you so much for sharing that story. As you said, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
But it's good that you had, a little bit of support from the instructor as well as your training, how to persevere with that. It's a very rough time.
And the thing I'll just conclude with on that is that had nothing to do with punching or kicking. You know what I'm saying? That had to do with about, okay, what do you do when you're up against it? How are you going to show up? How are you going to serve? How are you going to, show the strength that you need to, as well as the vulnerability? It's a real balance. That's the one thing I learned from Grandmaster Lee, is that 100% strength comes from 100% vulnerability. I didn't know to, talk about it in that way when I was 17, but as I've done my own, growth and research, that's what I realized he was emulating for me.
Metaphorically, kind of life sometimes punches and kicks us in the face, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
Learning how to deal with that sometimes can be really challenging.
That's right.
And you're right. That translation of martial arts, now that I'm thinking about it, it definitely, martial arts definitely teaches perseverance.
Yeah. And I think too, that if we are able to continue to persevere through the toughest times in our life, even though they're incredibly difficult and painful, and we probably would never want to go through them again, when we get on the other side, and if we've really been in our integrity of moving through that, they can be some of the most precious times in our life. The greatest lessons that we've learned and the things that we're proudest of in terms of what we've been able to move through.
That's really amazing. So I wanted to go back to your coaching and keynote speaking. How exactly do you coach businesses? You mentioned about leadership and everything.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit more specifically about that. What aspects of leadership? Because obviously it's you're not people in the business world are not going to punch you, and most of the time they don't. Go around punching people they don't like, or the competitors.
Let me just start by saying this. For me, leadership, the biggest piece of leadership is self-awareness. And then being able to understand that as the most powerful of leaders, in my opinion, are those that are here to serve. There's a quote by William Arthur Ward that I'll oftentimes use. It says, "We must be silent before we can listen. We must listen before we can learn. We must learn before we can prepare. We must prepare before we can serve. And we must serve before we can lead." We must serve before we can lead. So the only way that I know to be able to be an outstanding leader is to make sure that I'm constantly working on myself and developing myself from a mental, a spiritual, emotional standpoint, a physical standpoint, and to carry that vision for people, because most people don't want people to tell them what to do. They want people to show them what to do through their examples And I want to make this distinction too, because I do this with my leadership clients, is not necessarily hold people capable or hold people accountable. You need to do this. I'm going to hold you accountable, which quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. But I love to put a little twist on that, saying we need to learn to hold people capable, which means I'm going to see greatness in you. I'm going to see potential in you. And if you want to see that potential as well, I'm going to hold you to that standard. And so that's some of the things that I work with as well. And I think that sometimes people think that their personal lives and their professional lives are two separate silos. And there are many times there can be. However, I also subscribe to the fact that the way that most people show up in one area of their life, they show up in every area of their life. So if they're having difficulties in communication at home with their family, their spouse, they're probably having communication problems at work. You know what I'm saying? And so what I do with my folks that I work with from a coaching standpoint is we get a really clear idea of what their vision is. And many times it's not, they can't articulate what they want, but they can articulate what they don't want to have happen. So then we flip that around. So because if you're, what you're looking for, you're going to normally see. So if you're looking for success and breakthrough, that's what you're going to see. And then I say, okay, now that we know that you have that vision, then what are the strategies to make it happen? What is the mindset shifts that need to occur? What are the energy drains that maybe you're taking part in your life that are holding you back? And what are the specific next steps that we can take? And knowing that the road to black belt didn't happen overnight. It happens because you keep showing up and keep being committed to taking inspired action. So that's in a nutshell what I do when I coach.
I mean, who exactly do you coach? I mean, CEOs, executives, business owners?
It's mostly men, interestingly enough. Not that I'm opposed to coaching women, and I have done that. And a lot of times it'll be entrepreneurial people, because even though I have a corporate background, people who are running their own businesses, that are stepping out on their own, they're having to learn the challenges of, leading a team and balancing, between their personal life and their entrepreneurial life. Those generally tend to be the people that are attracted to me most in terms of coaching.
I mean, from all the people that come to you for coaching help, I mean, was there any common blocks or themes that people have needed help with that they came to you?
Yeah. It's interesting. If I were to surmise it, because there's a lot of levels, but if I take it all the way down to its very core element, people don't believe they're good enough. Even the folks that you see that appear to be super confident and have all their ducks in a row, right? Sometimes the reason that they look that way is because they're so concerned about looking the opposite, right? And I know I've done that myself in my life, right? Feeling I always had to show up perfect and whatever. And when you start to shift away and you find out, hey, at the real core of that is that you lack confidence. You don't think you deserve what you need to do or what you want to have, et cetera. And you start working and building from there. That's when breakthroughs can really happen with people. And the other thing too is I think that particularly people who tend to be leaders and overachievers for that matter, they can get paralyzed because they see all the opportunity and it seems so big that they don't even know where to start. And one of the tenets that I coach through is something, begin with the end in mind, but then break it down, right? So how can you take a massive thing that you want to undertake and break it down into small steps? Just like on the road to black belt, you have a white belt and a yellow belt and an orange belt, right? What we do is we break it down. And then what happens is it's more digestible to achieve. And then when you have those small victories, it builds momentum.
Now, I wanted to touch upon something you mentioned before. Like you said, a lot of the people you helped have been entrepreneurs, particularly men. But when I went to your website and I was watching some of your videos, I noticed that there were a few women breaking some of those blocks.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, it's because, we do have some of the women, so obviously some of the people in our audience are women. I don't know the exact percentage, but definitely a lot are. I mean, and some people who are not that familiar with martial arts, and they think it's really macho, very masculine. And are there practical lessons that women may not be, really macho? Okay, I want to kick somebody's butt. Can learn, or apply in their life.
Let me first say, you'd asked me the question about who I normally coach.
Yeah.
And so it just happens to be that men have gravitated toward me in terms of coaching. Although I've coached women in the past and totally enjoyed it, and have taught and promoted, students to high levels of black belt that are female. What you're referring to, though, probably when you were watching my videos, is something I do. I have keynote speaking that I do. And then I also have something called a corporate board breaking experience. So I go to companies and I use the breaking of a board in martial arts as a personal metaphor for a breakthrough that they want to have in their lives. So, for instance, what we do is I take them through 3 key components, about making sure that they know how to have a solid foundation in their life in terms of practices, because even though you break the board with your hand, it's your entire body, particularly your legs, that help you generate the power. Number 2 is the ability to use a powerful voice. Now, in martial arts, we do that with what we call the ki-up in Korean, or ki in Japanese. It's the power yell. But what I bring in this program is, what are the things that you're saying to yourself? What is the chatter that's going on in your mind that needs to be up leveled? And then finally is the concept of not moving to the obstacle, but through the obstacle when you're breaking the board. So when you're looking to break that piece of wood, if you just go up to it, it will not break. You need to be going several inches through it. So what we do in this program is I take them through that, and then they write on one side of the board the limiting beliefs that have held them back from getting that breakthrough that they want. And then on the other side, they'll write the breakthrough that they want to achieve. And then they'll come up, and with the limiting beliefs facing them, that I'll coach them through breaking the board. So it becomes this physical anchor, this physical manifestation of them having their breakthrough. And I've had people that have had amazing breakthroughs afterwards just from that experience, because it acted as a catalyst to move them forward.
And actually, I noticed, like, when I was watching the videos, I said both men and women, when they were breaking boards, you just look at the expressions on their face. They felt very empowered doing that. And that's a really amazing exercise that you can bring in to even people.
And, and I'll share this with you. Number one, just as context, I mean, for me, there's nothing more attractive, awesome than a woman that's in her power and in her femininity, right? That she can have that balance. Just like I think there's nothing better for me when I meet a guy that not only can exhibit strength, but also has a compassionate heart. I think that male and female balance is important in both genders. But what's so interesting is, in doing the board breaking experience now for thousands of people, I notice one thing is that this is a generality now, is that many women initially, before they come up, are frightened, are scared, are worried that they won't have the physical strength to break the board. The men, they have a fear that a woman can break the board and they're not going to be able to do it, right? And what's so interesting is you see the personalities come, but then as you witnessed in my videos, man, when they actually do it, you just see this exuberance in their face, right? They just light up and they have this visceral feeling. And to me, it's one of the coolest things. Years ago, I did this. If I may share it, I think this is about inspirational stories, right? So if I can elaborate a little bit, I was doing it for a business group here in Denver, probably about 50 or 60 people. And everyone had gone through and successfully broken their board, with the exception of one lady. And now everyone is seated in their seats. And I would routinely, if someone's struggling, I'll take the board and I'll coach them through. So it's now just she and I in front of the room. And she hits it the first time and clunks off of it. She hits it the second time, clunks off of it. I look at her and I lean over and I say, I'm going to be here at this conference all weekend. If you don't break it on this one, we'll just get together tomorrow. We'll go to a private room and we'll just, I'll help you break the board. She starts to anchor. I can see her anchor, her power. She gets laser beam focused and rears back and goes crack. It breaks through the board, right? Now, as soon as she does it, Daniel, all 50, 60 people are on their feet, standing ovation. She jumps into my arms and there's tears going down her cheeks. Now, I found out later on that the reason that she couldn't break the board is she was in the early stages of multiple sclerosis. So with MS, she wasn't able to put her hand exactly where she needed to in the board. But what was so interesting is not only was that an incredible breakthrough for her, but everyone in the audience got something from that as well, because there's nothing more inspiring than to see someone struggle and then have the breakthrough. It's one I'll never forget.
Wow, that's really amazing. I mean, do you really need to have a lot of physical strength to break a board?
In all the years I've done it, I've only had one person not be able to break. So, it acts as a metaphor now, but what I will say is the boards that I use in my seminars are the exact same boards that my black belts use when they test for higher ranks and all my students. So
Wow.
they're not getting easy boards. They're getting regular martial art boards that you'd break in a martial arts school.
So how much of it is like mindset versus like physical prowess?
You need to have physical skills. Like I said, you need to be able to use your legs and your shoulders and hit the right place. But I would say that it is predominantly mental, right? I would say the same thing happens when we're in our lives and we want to go achieve something. We want to do something that makes us uncomfortable. It's not the actual thing that's making us uncomfortable. It's our mindset. It's the stories that we're telling ourselves about its difficulty or our inability to do it that holds us back.
So do you have any like habits or personal rituals that help keep you like grounded and like in peak performance you'd like to share with our audience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I had it in my second book, Breaking Through, and I'm going to kind of just go here so I can remember all of them. And in fact, if your audience is interested, afterwards, I'll give my website address. And if they go down, they will see an ebook called The 6 M's of Morning Mastery. And they can download it for free if they use the code that I give it. And these are the 6 things that I do each and every day to start my day. Each and every day. I've been doing it for 10, 15 years. The 6 M's of Morning Mastery. And so the first one is meditation. So I start each day with some form of meditation, usually 20 minutes of meditation, getting quiet. Of course, we do it in martial arts, but it's a great way for us to get anchored and get into that part of ourselves that's outside of that crazy mind, but get into our heart center, right? Then number 2 is what I'll call mind treatment. And this is positive affirmations that I'll speak. Most of us, I think the last stat I read is that we have 70,000 thoughts per day. The average person has 70,000 thoughts per day. Interesting piece about that, Daniel, is the vast majority of those are negative thoughts that we've repeated for days, months, even years. So it's being able to change that inside of ourselves and be proactive in terms of setting our mindset. Number 3 is mental imaging. So I once had a teacher tell me, Chris, if you're going to fantasize, you might as well win. And so as an athlete, I used it all the time, particularly in martial arts, is I would do mental imaging before I stepped in the ring. And I would train not only before a testing or a tournament physically, but also mentally. Well, it's the same thing. When we wake up each and every day, I visualize this right now. I visualize my entire day every morning before I get off of my meditation pillow. Then number 4 is movement. Every morning I do some sort of movement, some more than others. So I always do calisthenics and stretching. I do it 6 days a week. Sunday, I do a little bit lighter stuff. And then I have a morning workout. Most of us look at that and it's like we have to exercise every day. And exercise can be a little frightening for people, a little uncomfortable, but we're all designed to move. So what can you do each and every morning, whether it's stretching, walking, whatever it might be for you to get your body moving? Then number 5 is motivation. So what I do is I will listen to videos or watch videos, listen to motivational tapes. Quite honestly, to my opinion, right now, since we have YouTube, there's no excuse not to be able to. We have the best personal development library out there. So I will do that. And then finally, I'll do what I call memoir, which I'll do journaling. So that's basically the first hour to hour and 15 minutes of every morning. Now, what I always tell people is that's a lot. They're like, hey, Chris, I don't have that much time. I always say this to people, choose one and just start to develop some prowess in that, whatever that one is for you. And then maybe add a second and then add a third. And maybe you just stay at 3. but at least do something. Because in my experience and, studying people that are successful in both personal and professional in their lives, they each have powerful morning routines. So that's my little gift to you and the audience.
I appreciate that. That's great. I mean, you have so much wisdom, so it's really wonderful to hear all of this. That's why I'm so excited about all this. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned a little bit before, sometimes people get excited and motivated, and we'll just keep the reference about business now. Some people may want to, as an entrepreneur, may want to start their own business. But then there's also, like you said, another aspect of having that discipline. Can you maybe talk about what's the difference between being motivated and excited versus having discipline?
Yeah.
And what's
great distinction. The Japanese have a term, oh my gosh, koto no ibu, I think is what it is. And it means hero at the beginning. So that's what many of us do, right? We start out like shot out of a cannon, but we don't maintain. And for me, oftentimes in coaching, you'll hear take massive action, right? Take massive action. Right. And sometimes that's appropriate. But how many times have you taken massive action for a week or two and then you tailed off? See, what most people do is they move to that massive action. And when they do that, they go to something that I'll call the panic zone. It's so uncomfortable to maintain that pace. They literally snap back to where they started, sometimes even getting worse than they were before. What I advocate is something called the stretch zone. So let's just play with this a little bit. What if you decided, Daniel, that there was an activity that you wanted to do, that you wanted to commit to getting 1% better each and every day? That's all your commitment was. It was each and every day, I'm going to practice with the intention of getting 1% better each and every day. Now, if you took that practice and you did it for 365 consecutive days, at the end of that year, Daniel, if you grew 1% every day, you'd be 37 times better than when you started. That's not bad, right? So then you say, okay, Chris, what would happen if I decided that I was going to maintain that pace for another year and I was 37 times better after a year? I guess I'd be 74 times better at the end of 2 years. That's not how it works. You see, you'd actually be 1,400 times better, because good habits don't add up. They compound, like compounding interest. And if you maintain that 1% increase each day for 5 years, Daniel, you'd be 76 million times better at the end of that period. So the idea that I always tell people is choose what you're going to focus on, but then be committed to take small active steps each and every day, because small committed steps over time can compound into massive results. And that's, my friends, that's how you get your black belt. You don't show up one day and 2 weeks later have your black belt, and you're going to have problems. You're going to pull muscles. You're going to have injuries. Stuff's going to happen at work. You're going to lose jobs. Relationships are going to go sideways. But if you keep showing up, that's where the magic happens.
So, I mean, as you mentioned, it's part of life. Sometimes people get stuck in life. What are some powerful questions people can ask themselves when they do get stuck in some business, relationships?
Love it. So the first thing that I always tell people, I think it's 5 questions, is what's really happening here? So what do I mean by that? When we have challenges come into our lives and we're triggered, emotionally we're triggered, our feelings are hurt, fear comes in. It's okay to feel that feeling. But what I always tell people is allow yourself to feel it, but then ask yourself, what's really happening here? What's really happening is that person said this and I didn't appreciate it. What's really happening is I got a bill in the mail that was for much, much more than I ever expected. What's really happening here is I have a health issue. Okay, now when you know what's really happening, now you can deal with it outside of your story. Outside of, oh, woe is me, or I'm being mistreated, etc. We get to neutral and we look at what's really happening. Number 2, you ask yourself, what wants to happen here? So what do I mean by that? Sometimes when we're moving forward and we have a goal in mind and all of a sudden an obstacle comes. And man, that obstacle's there. I mentioned it slightly before, and I'll use it in this context though, is it doesn't mean we quit. what you have to ask yourself is, okay, what's it asking me to do? Where am I, where I'm being asked to maybe change direction, right? Because now we can be stubborn in our goals, but flexible in our methods. So what wants to happen? Maybe it's taking this path and taking this little detour to get where you want to go. And then ask yourself these 3 questions when you're up against it, when challenge is in front of you. Number 1, what do I need to keep doing? What are the habits that I use? What are the strategies that I utilize? What are the tools that are at my disposal that I know can really continue to serve me? Because sometimes when life goes haywire and we lose our center, what are the things we're going to hold ourselves to? So what do I need to keep doing? Number 2, what do I need to stop doing? What are the habits, mindset, strategies, et cetera, that I'm doing that really don't serve me anymore, but I've been doing them because I've always done them before, or I'm doing them because I'm fearful? What do I need to stop doing? And then number 5, what do I need to start doing? What is a different way for me to approach this than maybe I was before? And I think if we ask ourselves those 5 questions when challenges come in front of us, now we've got a recipe for being able to deal with them.
Wow, that's fantastic. I like those questions. It definitely makes you think about things, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's the times you mentioned you coach like high performance people. Like, what are like things that usually, get them started with? Like, how do you start working with people that are really high performance, have these high performance goals, whether it's like in business or in sports?
Yeah. I guess I would say is that success leaves clues. So if you are seeing someone that is successful, and when I say successful, we all have different definitions of that, right? Doesn't mean that we're multimillionaires, doesn't mean that we're degree black belts. It might mean that we're great parents. It might be that we're great in the work that we're doing, or we're making an impact. Is that when you are looking to succeed, number 1, success leaves clues. So be open to studying what other people are doing and be inspired by what that is. Like in terms of martial arts, I was, my hero growing up was the first world middleweight kickboxing champion. He's my other instructor. And that was someone that I followed to a T. So I realized what he was doing and I followed that. Now, did I have my own individualized expressions of that? Of course I did. But, when you study the people that are showing signs of success, it can just catapult you at a much faster rate. The other thing is be honest with yourself, right? What are my strengths and what are my areas of opportunity? Many times high performers have very high confidence levels in myself, and that's fantastic. But you also have to have the humility to say, where do I need to take accountability for things? Where can I change? Where am I responsible for life maybe not working out the way that I want? And where do I have the opportunity for changing? And then number 3, I would say is follow and do what you want to do with passion. Don't do it because you have to do it. Don't have it be a have to, have it be a want to or a get to. I'll share a story with you that was literally life-changing for me. Back about 20 years ago, I went through an extremely painful divorce. I had been married to my high school sweetheart. We had 2 young boys together. And now after 26 years together, that relationship had completed. Now, fortunately for me, our oldest son had gone off to college and our youngest son decided to stay with me while my former wife had moved to Hawaii and I live in Denver. So I was playing the role of single dad for the first time. Now, there were so many blessings around that. And my son was an amazing kid. And I started becoming overwhelmed because now all the things I used to share with my spouse, I was doing just by myself. And one of them was taking my son, who didn't have his license yet, he was 13, 14 years old, to all of his activities. I drove him in the morning to school. I picked him up at the end of school. I drove him to work. I drove him on his little dates. And oftentimes it was disruptive to my routine. So I was in a high school parking lot one afternoon, waiting to pick up my son, Jason, from school. And I was a little grumpy. I was in the middle of a project. I had to leave. And here I am sitting in the parking lot. So I call my good buddy, Tom, who's another martial arts instructor. And I start complaining. Tom, I can't believe it. I got to take him to school in the morning. I got to take him Yeah, I got to pick him up. I take him on his little dates. I have no personal life anymore, blah, 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 blah. And he listens to me. But as any good friend, then he said this to me. He said, Chris, I need you to understand something. You don't have to take your son to school. You get to take him to school. Because the alternative was he could be 3,000 miles away with his mom, and I got to see him 2 times a year. And so I guess I share that story because lean into the things that bring passion to your life, but also understand how much there is to be grateful for, even if it's routine things that you don't maybe enjoy. If you flip the switch and say, wow, I don't have to do this. I get to do this. I get to move my body and exercise. I get to eat healthy foods. I get to, read inspiring books, whatever that is. Now, all of a sudden, we take our power back, and that can move us forward in an extremely powerful way.
So what is your take about fear? Because I'm sure like in the martial arts, you probably deal with fear. And how do you teach people how to overcome fear?
Yeah. Number one is we're always going to have fear. I think that's the first thing that people will say is, I want to get rid of fear. I'm going to be here to first tell you that's not going to happen. Okay. Fear is a natural part of our life. And in fact, if you think about it, it's a beautiful tool for us. We as a species would not have survived if we wouldn't have developed fear at a very early time when we were walking the world with the saber-toothed tiger who wanted to eat us for lunch. So when we saw the tiger, we had fear. We knew enough to either fight or flee, right? The problem is, though, is we don't face the saber-toothed tiger anymore in real life, but we can oftentimes face it every day by letting our fears overcome us. Now, I want to give you a little something that's helped me tremendously when I understood this distinction. You know how scientists will do brain scans and they'll, put the lobes up on people and they'll see how the brain lights up during certain thoughts and emotions. So this study was happening where they brought these people in and they had them hooked up to the electrodes and they were asking them how they were feeling. And they were seeing how the brain was lighting up very distinctly on very specific emotions. So if they were happy, for instance, it would light up here. And if they were, if they were agitated, it would light up here. And if they were happy or they were excited, it would light up here. And they went through all of these feelings and they noticed that every feeling was unique in where it lit up in the brain, except for 2. You see, anxiety had a very specific area it would light up. But what they found out is that not only would it light up in that area when people said they were anxious, it would also light up when they said they were excited. So the brain couldn't differentiate between fear, anxiety, and excitement. So, and this is a daily practice for me, but next time you're in that, we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, and you're feeling anxious, rather than say, I got to calm down, I got to get rid of my anxiety. What if you took a breath and said, wow, I must be really excited about this. This is what I use when I train public speakers, because people, get all excited or go get all anxious before they get on stage. What if you could transform that to say, I must be really excited to step out on stage? It's a game changer. And that's something that I utilize in my own personal life and highly recommend it for others to do as well.
And you talked about transformation. Can you share a story or two of how you help your clients with their own personal transformation, like in their business or their personal lives?
I'll give you one example comes to me, and this was a female client. Her name is Meg. And Meg came to me in a very interesting part of her life. She came to me because she wanted to move into her dream career. And she was in a very interesting time in her life. She had just completed her divorce from being with a man for 25 years. Both of her kids had recently moved out of the house. They were grown. So she's an empty nester. And in order to make ends meet, she wasn't doing one job she hated. She was doing 2 jobs she hated. Okay. So she came to me about, up-leveling her career. And so I asked her, I said, our first session, I said, what is your dream career? And she said, Chris, if I could really do this right, here's what I would do. I would marry my love of nursing with my love of technology. I said, well, that's brilliant. I said, do those types of jobs exist? And she said, yes. In fact, as a matter of fact, about a month ago, my friend Sarah called me up and asked if I would interview for that very type job. And I said, what happened? She said, I was just completing the divorce. My son was going through some struggles. So I figured it wasn't the right time to pursue it. I said, okay, Meg, let me ask you this. Do you think that job might still be available? She said, I don't know. I said, are you willing to give Sarah a call? As soon as our coaching lesson is done, are you willing to go home and call Sarah? She goes, I am. So she leaves our coaching session. She goes home and calls up Sarah. And the conversation, Daniel, I'm not lying, goes like this. Hi, Meg. So great to hear from you. Wait, what? You're still interested in the position? I can't believe you're calling right now. I'm literally getting ready to go into a meeting to offer the position to our top candidate. But if you're still in the running, I'll hold off until we can speak to you. So this was a Tuesday. On Thursday, Meg was flying to San Diego for intense interviews. And on Friday, Daniel, she flew back to Denver with her dream job in hand. She took inspired action. Even when it seemed like it wasn't the right time, even when she thought the opportunity passed her by, what if she wouldn't have made the phone call? So the question I always ask people is, what phone call are you supposed to be making? Or what conversation are you supposed to have? Because there's so many opportunities out there that we convince ourselves aren't available when many times they are, or if they're not, maybe even something better. Action has a way of helping us overcome the fear, even if it's very small, because it helps us build momentum. Just that one step leads to the next step that leads to the next step.
Now, we've been talking about your coaching a lot, but you also just mentioned you're a keynote speaker. What topics do you usually talk about as a speaker?
Yeah, so I have several titles, but it's basically around something I call black belt leadership, which is, infusing our lives with the champion's mindset. So how can we take all these principles that I was just sharing with you today, and I put it into a keynote address that's also active? So I have people up and moving, anchoring the principles with martial art movement. I'll bring people up on stage with me to demonstrate those things. So again, it's kind of my life's work, which is using martial arts as a metaphor for us to be able to break through and live our best lives and become the best people we were meant to be. So, and those principles that I said to you before are the key components, creating a purposeful vision, having conscious persistence, living a life and leadership of service, and then taking inspired action. So those are the things I speak about.
Great. So Chris, if somebody's interested, if you have any questions about our interview today or they're interested in working with you, what are the best ways to reach out to you?
Excellent. Best way to reach out, Daniel, is simply go to my website, it's my name, chrisnatzke.com, CHRIS, N as in Navy, AT, Z as in zebra, KE.com, chrisnatzke.com. And you can go in there. If you go into the coaching tab, there's a place to have a 30-minute complimentary discussion with me. If you're interested in having me come and speak, there's also a form in there that you can set up a 30-minute call with me as well. And then also, I mentioned it before, but if you scroll down on the homepage, you'll see my ebook, free ebook, 6 M's of Morning Mastery. There's a code there. Just put in the code and you can get your copy as well.
Chris, do you have any final message or anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up our conversation today?
I'll just say this, and this is kind of my tagline for my business, for speaking and coaching, is champions don't need to be told what to do. They just need to be reminded. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's about slowing down and remembering just how much power we actually have. And number two, it's about reminding ourselves, meaning changing our mindset, our perception, and then taking that consistent and inspired action to make it happen. So there's a champion, I believe, in all of us. And if we slow down and we take a breath when we're in the worst of it, and we realize there's something bigger that we even realize is inside of ourselves, to go for it. And quite honestly, sometimes it's difficult to do by ourselves. So that's one of the reasons I do the work I do. So if you're interested in having that discussion, be happy to do it.
Chris, I really wanted to thank you so much for coming on and doing this interview. Again, I'm a huge martial arts fan, so for you to come on the show really meant a lot to me. I know you're really busy. So thank you so much for this. And, again, congratulations on all your tremendous amount of accomplishments. You probably have, a much longer list than I mentioned before. And, and also all the people that you've helped. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and experience with our audience today. I got a lot out of our session today. I'm sure a lot of other people will. So again, thank you so much for all.
Thanks, my friend. It's been my pleasure.